Welcome to a whole new dimension of mainsail handling. This video is all about upgrading your existing furling mast with an electric motor. When synchronized with Seldén's electric winch for the outhaul, you will find yourself handling the mainsail by the push of a button. It's actually not that difficult to obtain this relaxed sailing. We will walk you through the installation of the mast motor. Okay, let's get started. The installation is taking place in a marina remote from our workshop, so we have made sure to bring all the tools and equipment needed for a smooth assembly. In the assembly instructions, you will find it all listed, and as you can see, most of the tools are normal hand tools, perhaps with the exception of the pop rivet gun. The installation can be done to Seldén's R and F sections. The R sections were introduced back in 1986 and used until they were replaced by the F sections in 2002. Your kit is created for your exact mast section, and this drawing describes where to drill the holes. This machined and anodized aluminium housing contains the 42 volt motor and its gearbox. By using a 42 volt motor, the size of this motor is small enough to fit inside the mast section, without bigger cutouts. Basically, you make 3 holes and screw it in. Starting by removing the covers and the upper grease plug. The furling section in your mast has a tensioner, and we will need to release the tension and disconnect the furling section from the line driver. Release the screw that secures the locking tube until you can move the tube upwards. Grab the furling extrusion and rotate the line driver anti-clockwise until the furling section is slack. After this, pull out the split pin and remove the clevis pin connecting the furling section to the line driver. This is done through the lower grease hole on the port side of the mast. Now we can remove the line driver. Now we are going to prepare the mast, and to make it easier for us, we've temporarily removed some fittings. We're going to feed the electric motor into the mast from below, so we're removing the heel from the mast. Drill out the rivets to start with, and knock the heel with a piece of wood to prevent damages. Here, we knock out the heel with a piece of wood to prevent damages. The mast is now prepared for the installation, and it's time to measure up according to the drawing. With a pencil, make a mark in line with the centre of the lower fixing hole for the line driver. This will be the datum from which we measure the location of the 3 holes used for the fasteners of the motor. The motor will be fixed with 1 bolt on the starboard side and 2 on the port. For this F246 section, we measure 184 mm from the datum. Wrap a piece of paper around the mast as we show here. This will ensure that the holes on each side will match. Make a mark from the B line and aft on both sides. Make a mark from the B-line and aft, on both sides. Measure from the B-line according to the drawing and you will get the position of the upper holes. Double check that you have the same distance measured from the bottom end of the mast section. Next, centre punch the mark to aid when drilling. Drill the hole, and remember, when drilling in aluminium, always apply a coolant to the drill bit. This is the port side of the mast, and as you see, we have marked the locations for the two holes. One matches the hole we just drilled on the starboard side, and the other one is 37mm further down the mast. Start with a smaller drill, and then enlarge the hole. This cleat has to go, and we need to find a new place for it when we're done. The next step is to cut the final holes with a hole saw, and again we use lubricant for a clean cut. Now we chamfer the holes with a file. Now with all the holes drilled, we can clean up the mast. We have made the holes for the motor, and now we will focus on routing of the cables. As the motor is 42 volt, the dimension of the cables is only 6mm. Drill a hole in from the edge of the mast section as stated on the drawing. Now we need a hole saw on a long shaft. Again, we will chamfer the holes to prevent damages to the cables. The line drive will now be taken apart to replace the shaft for a longer one, and as there are ball bearings that will come loose, we want to do this on a surface where the bearings will not get lost. Bear in mind that this line driver is 12 years old, and we may need to use some force to take it apart. For this reason, we have built ourselves a wooden jig that will keep it in place. Punch out the upper locking pin. The ball bearing race will now come loose and the bearings will fall down on our jig. Punch out the locking pin for the bevel gear. These locking pins shall not be reused as they are exhausted, so make sure that they are put aside. In the kit, there are new pins included. Now pull out the shaft. As in this example, we've had to knock it out with a hammer. Check that you haven't lost any ball bearings. There should be 12 of them in each ball race. Remove the outer ball bearing race and possible washers. These washers are used to fine-tune the play of the ball bearings, and the number of washers can vary. Now we degrease and clean the bevel gear. We are now going to put the drive unit back together, taking this opportunity to grease the ball bearings. The grease will also help to keep the ball bearings in place during the reassembly. It's now time to fit the new longer shaft that allows us to connect to the motor later on. Feed the adjustment washers for the upper bearing onto the shaft and then gently push it through the upper bearing. Put the washers for the lower bearing onto the shaft and attach the bevel gear. Align the hole in the bevel gear with the hole in the shaft and fit the new locking pin. In the lower end of the new longer shaft, we need a pin that will connect to the electric drive. Put some locking adhesive on the pin and fit it in so that it protrudes equally on both sides. Fit the rubber cover over the upper bearing. Now you are done with the conversion of your line driver, and as well as servicing it, it has been overhauled at the same time. It's time to put the line driver back into the mast, but first we lubricate the bevel gears with grease. This is the clutch located between the original line driver and the electric motor. There is a hole in the black flange and we can put a long bolt there, temporarily, just to lift it in. Engage it into the line driver's new shaft. The pin in the shaft will sit in the slot of the clutch. We hold it in place with mole grips. Now we place the motor inside the mast. The two holes are on the port side and the single hole is on the starboard side. Here we pull the cables through the hole we just made. For extra protection, where the cables pass through the hole, we fit some heat shrink hose over them. Put the fixing bolts through the aluminium bushings and apply some grease on the threads. The motor is now fixed inside the mast and we will fit the clutch plunger. Fit it like this and screw it into the flange. Lift the plunger and insert the clutch bracket. Move the clutch back and forth and decide the best position for the bracket. Mark the holes with a pencil and fit the bracket. Centre punch the mark and drill a hole and tap. Put some grease on the screws and fit the bracket. We can refit the heel and replace the pop rivets. The mandrel pin and the pop rivets are not stainless, so they must be punched out. These will fall out of the heel when the mast is stepped. Now align the furling section to the line driver. Here we connect the furling section to the line driver with the clevis pin and its split pin. Open the split pin to approximately 25 degrees. Tension up the furling section. A good idea is to put some rigging screw oil on the tensioning screw. After this, grab the section through the upper inspection hole and turn the winch handle clockwise until you lose the grip around the section. Now the middle part of the section has just about lifted off the bottom of the sail compartment and you have reached a sufficient tension of your furling section. It should not be over tightened as well, as this will put unnecessary load on the ball bearings. Line up the locking tube and the lower part of the furling section and move the locking tube down so it engages the section underneath the tensioning screw. Tighten the locking screw. Put back the covers over the grease holes and the access holes. Now apply the new sticker to the line driver. Add the plug to the line driver to prevent someone sticking a winch handle into it when the electric motor is engaged. The installation is complete and the mast is ready to step and go sailing.